パパパパンパンパンパンパパーンってか
随分上機嫌だな。
Whenever any piece of media exits development hell and finally gets a release, there's an element of skepticism from those that consume it. These kinds of delays will typically have reasons that are worse than problems with the game itself, but the behind-the-scenes bureaucracy almost always leads to a terrible product. With Final Fantasy XV being announced as a companion game to 13 in 2006's Versus 13, and switching directors prior to earnest development, it's hard to deny the anxiety felt in the collective gaming community with its final release. While there are issues abound that prevent this newest entry from achieving perfection, and the recent delays of the game haven't prevented the situation Square Enix was trying to avoid, rest assured that the overall package is still worth a play. There was once a time when every nation on the planet held a magic crystal that provided power and protection through royal lines. Constant warring between those nations has left the Kingdom of Lucis as the only remaining sovereign nation with a crystal, causing much anxiety amongst the other governments, which are ultimately united as the Niflheim Empire. After a lengthy war, the Empire and Lucis call a truce 30 years prior to the present, before that's broken 18 years later when Niflheim takes control of Tenebrae, the homeland of the oracles responsible for ensuring the nights don't get any longer. None of what I just stated is told properly in the game and is instead espoused elsewhere to maintain narrative focus on the four main protagonists. Noctis is the Lucian prince next in line for the throne, and he and his three friends are on a road trip to the city of Altissa, where he is to be wed to the current oracle Lunafreya to solidify a peace treaty between his country and the Empire. Unfortunately, the purpose of his journey is changed when Niflheim destroys the Lucian capital of Insomnia, stealing the magic crystal and causing the king's death. Instead, the party must now recover the crystal and attempt to halt the machinations of their sworn enemy. The interactions between Noct and his crew remain front and center, with the characters riffing on not only the day-to-day situations they find themselves involved in, but each other. This serves the narrative, allowing the experience to remain personal, as you only really see things from their perspective for the most part. It also serves the player, as you're able to get a feeling for each character's personality and ultimately understand their relationship and how it develops throughout the game. Gladio is the big guy with a heart of gold, Prompto is the Genki guy with an immature personality and the least combat experience, Ignis is the stoic battle butler, and Noctis is a guy coming to grips with his new responsibility and his need to ultimately serve his land as a king. The knowledge you gain of these characters is given naturally, coming across as spoken dialogue in combat, or while traveling on foot or in their car, and body language in scenes meant to give you other equally important information. This attention to detail regarding the party is lost when the game shifts focus a bit to explain their impetus, however. It's understandable that Square Enix wouldn't want to retread territory already covered in other forms of media, but a lengthier sequence showcasing Insomnia's downfall would make what is being shown feel more coherent, and a slightly larger focus on what Luna accomplishes on her own journey would ensure players care more about her. Same thing goes for these folks here. Playing the game, you get a sense that things that would help flesh out the story were cut for the sake of brevity, pacing, or better develop future content, but I argue that those sequences should have remained to be built upon with content additions instead. Add to all of this some very Final Fantasy twists and a conclusion worthy of the series, and you have a story and narrative that will either grip you, annoy you, confuse you, or do all of that by the time the credits roll. It's a good thing that reaching those credits is a pretty fun affair once everything clicks. Your four-man crew spends its time traveling the continent, performing mostly menial tasks, bounty hunts, and, at times, actually moving the story forward. In a fashion similar to Western RPGs, 15 is loaded with side quests that sometimes flesh out the world and its minor characters, but oftentimes do nothing other than serve as filler to pad the game length. And, as it is with that particular subgenre, the great majority of the quests involve killing beasts or demons. The turn-based combat of previous games has been ditched in favor of fast-paced, action-oriented skirmishes in the vein of Kingdom Hearts. Holding circle or B initiates the Blitz maneuver, a bread-and-butter standard combo that, combined with the special warping technique, contributes 70% to survivability in battles. Noctis can switch between 4 weapons on the fly using the D-pad from a pool of 8 different kinds, 2 sets of which are available only to him. Warping and phasing are especially important, as they allow easy traversal of the combat area, fast attacking of several enemies in succession, and simple defense. These abilities become second nature within minutes of play, which is good, since your AI companions can go down pretty easily without a bit of micromanagement. They'll also sometimes disappear, leaving you to handle everything on your own. Still, your boys are there when it counts. Link strikes with the nearest partner activate when attacking the blind side of an enemy, typically the rear, adding a flashy team animation to the already impressive damage bonuses. Also, command techniques are specific maneuvers that your regular party and guest members can perform that have various outcomes, from Ignis marking enemies for Nox warp strikes to a massive overhead cleave from Gladio's greatsword. Each technique requires a certain portion of the tech meter, and although it fills with a decent speed, consideration of when to use them should be taken. Part of the Fab Four's journey also involves reclaiming weapons of war used by Nox ancestors, and the acquisition of 3 in the main story enables usage of all of them at once, acting as this game's limit break. Possibly the greatest change to combat, aside from the general shift away from choosing attacks from menus, involves elemental and summon magic, with its employ becoming rather reduced by way of the narrative. Gone are spells like Haste, Wall, Cure, and Quake, with only fire, ice, and thunder magic being the real remaining mainstays. Energy is drawn from the planet by Noctis and concentrated in magic flasks that are then equipped in limited numbers in a character's weapon slot. In use, magic is devastatingly powerful and can easily turn the tide of a battle when used effectively. It also has a nasty effect of breaking your combat flow, since all magic requires you stand in place to aim it manually, though the targeting system helps expedite this. The need to place magic in one of your 4 weapon slots seems unnecessary, as a button on the controller is entirely devoted to the use of consumables and items, and as a consumable weapon, magic could have received its own category, leaving the 4 slot open for something else. On that note, multiple weapon loadouts for Noctis could have allowed for more advanced planning for different combinations of threats, and eliminated the break and pacing caused by having to change gear on the character menu mid-battle. Because Noctis has no option for different loadouts, diversifying those of his partners against the various enemy weaknesses becomes key to covering as many bases as possible when dealing death. When they're alive anyway. Upon completion of a day's travels, Noctis and company are wont to get a good night's rest, either at the various outposts in Lucis or at camping havens that litter the land. Calling it quits for the night is the only way to level up, as defeating foes only banks EXP, and the best status buffs come from eating food cooked by Ignis while at camp or at Crow's Nest restaurants located at almost every outpost. Staying at better rest stops yields better experience multipliers at the cost of more gil, so choosing when to actually hit the sack requires a bit of discretion. While leveling up increases your party's base stats, new abilities are only obtained by using AP on the Ascension menu. AP can be gained in a variety of ways, including driving long distances, making camp and training with your buddies, and simply warp striking foes to death. More AP making opportunities are available through the Ascension menu, and you'll ultimately gain most abilities during the first play, with the 4 brothers becoming powerful enough to take on many of the stronger fiends with enough effort, and maybe an astral summon after gaining their favor. But don't count on that occurring too often, since when an astral appears is determined by the game and not the player. With the myriad tools at your disposal, progress through the game is ultimately a smooth and enjoyable experience throughout, with deaths only occurring due to a lack of planning during side quests or longer dungeons. Like any Western RPG, the wealth of side content can cause over-leveling, making the game a cakewalk, as it seems to be balanced for low-level play and speedier runs. However, with how swift the story pacing is, there is a point near the end where the game becomes a slog. You're funneled through trains and hallways, a lot of them without your weapons, receiving large dumps of exposition, and it's not for everyone. Certainly wasn't for me. Without spoiling anything, the final chapter, in general, is pretty bad, with no exploration and a particular character telling you things from a menu. Thankfully, talking to an NPC allows you to travel back in time and roam the land to your heart's content. Even after finishing the game, Final Fantasy XV gives you access to the world to tick those quest boxes and achieve 100% completion. Noctis and friends can tackle leftover quests and even new high-level dungeons. You can even gain access to a flying variant of your trusty car that's more trouble than it's worth. It would be an invaluable tool for traversing the continent if one hit to a wing didn't destroy the car, resulting in a game over, and you could actually fly everywhere. But it still lets you cover most of the continent faster, so it's up to you. Whether you've got butts in the seats or boots on the ground, you'll notice that Final Fantasy XV, hands down, is a great looking game, with large, beautiful, wide open landscapes connecting cities and towns large and small. The continent of Lucis is very reminiscent of North America, with its truck stops, food culture, and reliance on road travel. There's also Altissa, which is heavily inspired by Venice. The visuals are all made in a way that replicate the pre-rendered cinematics from previous games well, and it looks great overall. Still, though there are certain scenes and certain times of day when the Luminous Studio engine look best, others just don't cut it. Examples include many NPC characters looking rather low poly, and a lot of character animations looking rather robotic compared to others seen throughout the game. Another negative to note is the presence of atrocious loading times when fast traveling, depending on the distance, though it's still faster than, say, taking 9 minutes to travel from Hammerhead to Cape Kime. Sound design is also wonderful. The music, composed by Yoko Shimomura, while often sparse during actual travel, is outstanding, focusing more on environmental cues and experiences more than general background filler, with some examples being whenever the party enters the resting area of a beast, or the leitmotifs of characters like Sydney. You can even purchase the soundtracks of previous games, allowing you to listen to them while in the car or on foot, as long as you have the MP3 player. I will say that the English dub voices may have to grow on you, but those of the main characters, regardless of language chosen, fit their energy and personality well. Also, I personally prefer the Japanese voice cast, but I do play a lot of titles in Japanese, so I have a bias towards that language. This game, the culmination of 10 years of planning, scenario work, art creation, and marketing, is one of the few that come out of such a long span of development that is actually good, defying all logic. It's not only good, it's great, if a bit flawed. It is the most ambitious title in the series to date, and the changes actually work, creating a game that is accessible to both fans and newcomers on not only a gameplay level, but also graphically and tonally, since the focus on the four bros more than the prophecy following the main character ditches many of the JRPG tropes that keep Westerners away from games like this. Would I say that Final Fantasy XV is worth a 10-year wait? Well, no, of course not. And no one really had to, considering there were plenty of other good titles to keep fans busy in the meantime. But, now that it's out, anyone watching this with a PS4 or Xbox One interested in it should take the plunge. It's definitely worth your while. Hey everyone, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. It's the latest in my push to share my thoughts on specific games and the games medium as a whole. If you thought the video was good, or that it sucked, leave a thumb up or down and be sure to tell me why in the comments below. You could also just say what's up, or we can discuss the game at length. If you dig my content and enjoy my voice, feel free to subscribe and click that bell to ensure you're notified of my next vid. Don't forget to play what you love, and I'll see you in the next one.